Democrats are pushing to include certain immigration protections in President Biden's sweeping new social spending plan. Democratic aides met with the Senate parliamentarian on Tuesday. They are attempting to provide work permits, permission to travel, and temporary protection from deportation to millions of undocumented immigrants across the country. It is the third time Democrats have tried including new immigration provisions in Mr. Biden's Build Back Better agenda. For more on all of this, let's bring in the author of the article, CBS News immigration reporter Camilo Montoya-Galvez. Camilo, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. So explain what Democrats are trying to do to accommodate the nearly 7 million immigrants living in the U.S. without legal status. We know that, as we said up top, this is the third time they're trying to include some provisions into this Build Back Better plan.
Yeah, that's right, Tanya. Democratic lawmakers in the Senate are moving forward with this ambitious plan that would provide 10 years of work authorization and deportation protections to an estimated 7 million immigrants living in the U.S. without legal permission, including farm workers and other pandemic-era essential workers, including those who work in the medical field. We know that this, as you mentioned, is the third attempt by Democrats to include some sort of immigration relief provision in the sweeping social spending bill that Democrats hope to pass through the budget reconciliation process. But before they can include this new provision in the sweeping plan, they must first get a green light from the Senate parliamentarian, Tanya, who is in charge of determining whether portions of legislation can be included through this arcane process. She has to determine, Tanya, that the provisions are primarily budget related, and we know that she has already rejected 2 previous immigration provisions that would have placed immigrants on a pathway to U.S. citizenship because she determined that they were not primarily budget related. However, this time, after this meeting yesterday, Democratic aides said that the parliamentarian did not issue any guidance and did not outright reject the proposal, and they interpret this as a good positive sign for them.
So, to your point, that Democrats are hoping the third time is the charm. When revisiting the Senate parliamentarian, what is different about this time around? What did they leave in, take out, or how did they frame these provisions?
That's an important question. There are several important and major differences between this latest proposal and the previous ones proposed by Democrats. This plan would allow the Department of Homeland Security to give certain undocumented immigrants something that is called parole, and this legal classification allows them to apply for work permits and for protections from deportation, but importantly, it does not allow them to adjust to green card status or to eventually obtain U.S. citizenship, unlike the previous other 2 proposals. So that is a major difference, that it is not a legalization program. It is also temporary because the program would expire in 2031, and it is also something that would have to be subject to review by the Department of Homeland Security, in the sense that this department would have to adjudicate applications on a case-by-case basis and could reject applicants based on criminal histories or if they fail to pass background checks. And while this is not the legalization program that Democrats have long hoped for, they really view this, Tanya, as their last best chance to pass some sort of immigration reform in Congress because, as you know, there is broad opposition within the Republican Party to legalize any undocumented immigrant here in the U.S., given the situation at the U.S.-Mexico border. And we know that Democrats' control of the House of Representatives could be in jeopardy next year because of the midterms.
Well, speaking of the border and the situation there, Camilo, apprehensions remain high, correct, despite a decline in the past 3 consecutive months? What's the latest? What is happening there? And what are the greatest challenges we're facing at the border?
Yeah, as you know, arrests of migrants and asylum seekers skyrocketed this summer to unprecedented levels, even though apprehensions of migrants tend to decline in the hot summer months. But they have steadily decreased since July, and we saw that trend continue in October. We saw a significant reduction in the number of families with children and unaccompanied minors taken into custody in October, but the number of migrant single adults apprehended are still very high. And one of the reasons for that, Tanya, is that there is a high rate of repeat border crossings because many of the migrants, especially single adults who are being expelled to Mexico under this Title 42 policy, are actually trying to cross the border multiple times, and they are counted on multiple occasions. And so that is inflating the apprehension numbers, according to administration officials. But we've also seen a significant reduction in certain nationalities. We saw a huge decline in the number of Haitians and Ecuadorians arrested at the U.S.-Mexico border in October, and this is after the U.S. expelled more than 8,000 Haitians to Haiti in just 4 weeks in September, and after Mexico imposed visa restrictions on Ecuadorian nationals who were flying into Mexico and then crossing the U.S.-Mexico border.
And Camilo, Democrats are beginning to speak out against the Biden administration's continued use of Title 42. As you know, it is the Trump-era border expulsion policy that was implemented last year in an effort to curb the spread of COVID-19. However, critics say it's sort of a smokescreen for just keeping immigrants out. Officials say the policy is unnecessary and did lack a public health rationale. So what is the latest on this debate? Where is the Biden administration standing on this one?
Yeah, this is such a critical policy question for this administration, Tanya, that has promised to rebuild asylum processing and to move away from those draconian Trump-era immigration restrictions that were heavily criticized by Democrats and immigration activists. The Biden administration has made several changes, including exempting unaccompanied children from these Title 42 expulsions, which do not allow migrants to seek asylum. But it has continued to heavily rely on this policy to regulate migration flows. The vast majority of single adults, for example, continue to be expelled to Mexico using this authority, Title 42. And the Biden administration has relied on the same Trump-era argument to defend this policy. It has said that it needs these expulsions to continue because otherwise Border Patrol facilities are going to become severely overcrowded, and that is going to create an environment that is conducive to the spread of the coronavirus. However, that argument is undermined by the fact, Tanya, that several CDC officials have come out and said that they did not support this policy and that it is not necessary to contain the spread of COVID-19. We actually reported last year, Tanya, that then CDC Director Robert Redfield was pressured by Trump-era political appointees to sign this order despite internal opposition within the CDC.
All right, that would seem to take some of the air out of that argument. Camilo, I want to pivot to an immigration issue from another part of the world because you've also been covering the effort to resettle Afghan evacuees. How many at-risk Afghan citizens with U.S. ties are still seeking passage to the U.S., and what are some of the biggest issues with their application process?
Sure. So we know that in just 4 months, Tanya, over 28,000 Afghans overseas in Afghanistan or in third countries have applied for something called humanitarian parole, which it is an authority that the Department of Homeland Security has to authorize the rapid entry of individuals who don't have visas on urgent humanitarian grounds. But USCIS, U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, has approved just over 100 of these 28,000 applications. We also know that the State Department has received over 10,000 referrals for a special refugee program that the Biden administration created this summer to resettle Afghans who worked for the U.S., American-funded projects, or U.S.-based organizations, including news outlets. But that process, the refugee process, takes about 12 to 18 months to complete. So most of these folks have not been resettled yet. And it is important to note that these are Afghans overseas who were not evacuated by the U.S. and who are not currently undergoing processing to be resettled here. The U.S., as you know, has already admitted about 70,000 Afghans since the summer, and it is working to resettle them here in communities across America.
An ongoing effort. All right, Camilo Montoya-Galvez, thank you so much for your reporting. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Tanya.